Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Journey at Memorial Drive, United Methodist Church. My name is Sean. I'm the senior pastor here, and I am just so delighted that you have come this evening as we welcome our friends from Pantsuit Politics. Thank you for the two of you being here. Now, to say that we live in a divided society is relatively cliche at this point, but I, for one, remain hopeful that there are options available to us that are something other than simply participating in the polarization. And I will have to confess that I am not the member of our household that discovered Pantsuit Politics. But over the past several years, my wife has several times sent me a link to one of the shows and said, you need to listen to this. Sarah and Beth, while I have listened to you many times, one of the things that I most appreciate about your work is that you do such a tremendous job yourselves of listening to each other, to others, to people with whom you disagree, to opinions that don't immediately match with yours. And as a pastor in this community, I am confident that that kind of listening is part of the Faithful Church's work today as we seek to be part of the healing of a divided world. And I know that many of you, this might be your first time here at the Journey. If that's true for you, welcome. Thank you for coming. If you need a restroom at any point during the evening, it's just out the doors right at the back of this room. And as the evening goes on, a part of how I understand our time will go is that these two will speak, and that's what we've come for, but they want to invite you into a conversation. And so if you have questions along the way, and when we get to Q&A at the end of the evening, just raise your hand. We've got someone who can bring a microphone to you so that we can all share in that question. And so if you are a member of this church, I'm grateful that you're here. If you're not a member of this church, I'm grateful that you're here. One of the things we care about deeply at MDUMC is being connected to God, connected to each other, connected to our community, connected to this world that God loves. And if that's something that you're into, I'd love to invite you to come and see all that God is doing here at MDUMC some Sunday morning. I'm going to be around afterwards if it'd be helpful to talk with me, but I know that's not why you came tonight. And so I want to say, would you please join me in welcoming Sarah and Beth? Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for being here. I was waiting for you to say, and now I listen religiously. But that's okay. We are so honored to be here. What we have heard about this church is that it is a trusted institution in the community. And when we read that, we thought, well, is there an institution in America that wouldn't be jealous of that? Hospitals, schools, colleges, the government itself, everybody is an institution suffering from a loss of trust. So first of all, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job. And you don't become a trusted institution in your community without listening. You don't become a trusted institution in your community without some conflict, without some tension. That's how you build trust. And so managing that, navigating that, dealing with that is what we're here to talk about today.
It's scary to have something that everyone wants to, because then, what do you do with it? Mm-hmm. And there can be a feeling in churches that have the trust of the community that now we need to just be very, very still so we don't lose it. And the experience that I have in my home church, which I think is also a trusted church in the community, is that trust is never static. You are gaining it or you are losing it all the time, whether you do that intentionally or not. And so the challenge as a church is, how do we intentionally sometimes take risks that may increase the trust that the community has for us, knowing that maybe it goes the other way this time too. But standing still is a choice. It's just a choice that we tend not to make very actively. And so when you start talking about politics in the church, I think that's a place where people definitely tend to say, let's just be very still so we don't lose this trust. And that is a choice that causes trust to decrease in a lot of circumstances. And so we want to kind of explore that with you tonight. How do we do politics at church in a way that's not partisan, in a way that doesn't overtake what we're really here to do, in a way that continues to build that sense that this is a trusted place, but it is a trusted place because we are willing to be relevant and not just hold tightly to what we've always been and done.
So a reminder, this will go so much better for everybody if it's a conversation. So don't feel like you have to wait for us to go, and now we're open for questions. If something hits you and you're like, wait, I have a question, or I want to add something, raise your hand. They're going to have mics to pass around. You will not be interrupting us. We want to hear from you. That will make this whole experience so much richer because we are willing to move a little bit and not stay still. And we like it, actually, when the audience is like, wait, we have a component of this we want to raise our hands about. So when Beth was just talking, we were thinking about tonight, and not just because I'm obsessed with it, but who watches The Pit?
Perfect.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good.
I worry that we would like to quit our day jobs and just be a Pit podcast now.
Yep. Why exactly? And
Thank
Beth
you.
says the real one, the professional one, is terrible. So clearly there's a hole in the market. Okay. The reason I was thinking about The Pit is because they do exactly what we were just talking about. They have something to say, and they don't apologize for it. But they have to accept. Disclosure. Half the people in this room know it is not a reason to panic if I start to tear up. But for those of you who do not regularly listen to our podcast, it is not cause for panic if I start to tear up. I do that all the time.
I will never, but I do have feelings. I promise.
It's true. It's so true. But at the Pit, they have to welcome everyone inside their doors, which is exactly what a church should also do. But so many people won't even try because they think they won't be welcomed in. But on The Pit, they have to, whether they can pay their bill or not. And so they come in and they care for people and they listen, and they are stuck within the confines of politics and institutional weaknesses and past abuses, and they just have to navigate it. They don't have a choice. They have to do the best they can with the person in front of them right then. And I think that show is hitting so hard because we are hungry for spaces that do that say everybody can come. And we might mess it up. We might mess it up sometimes. We may say something that offends you. We may cross a line. We may reference something that is a trigger for you and not even realize it. But we're going to keep trying because that's what's important. We're going to keep opening the doors when it's hard for us, when it's hard for you, because that's what brings us together. That's what builds the connection. That's what starts to put those bricks of trust back in the walls of our institutions.
A more political way to say that would be that pluralism is a feature, not a bug, in a church. Churches are supposed to be pluralist entities. We are supposed to be a pluralist nation. So it's great that you have a lot of different political philosophies, a lot of people registered in different ways, a lot of people supporting different candidates in your congregation. There would be a problem if that were not true. Church is supposed to be for everybody, people with very, very different life experiences. On my list when I get home from this trip is making a giant corn casserole because there was a death in my church this week of a person I've never met, a person who's never been to our service. He comes to our church to take a shower. He lives in his car, and we have a ministry where people can come take showers and get some nursing care, get connected with some resources. And this man passed away, and we are doing for him what we do for every church member. He's part of our community, so we're going to have a funeral and a lunch. And we could not do that without a lot of different kinds of people volunteering their time, having a heart for that kind of service, being willing to show up for the funeral of a person that they never met to honor that life. So if you can kind of set your expectations that way, there is a pull right now, especially I think among Christians specifically, to say like, well, our faith has to lead us to a correct political answer. No. We can be pluralist about the way we interpret the Bible. We can be pluralist about the way that we interpret political campaigns. As long as we respect that in each other, that is a tremendous asset.
We've really been thinking a lot about those sort of civic virtues on Pantsuit Politics this year because I think that we have pursued pluralism and tolerance, but people are also hungry for a red line. Yes, we want to make room space for everybody. Yes, we have to invite all kinds of different people into the space. But where's the line? Where is the line? And I think the examination of virtues, particularly civic virtues, is something a church is uniquely qualified to have. Okay, so how do we name our values? How do we put words to what we care about? I would particularly like the, dark and light play of vices and virtues, which again is not new to any church, not new to religion. So I think it's a really powerful way to say, okay, we're striving for this, but in the pursuit of the light, we also want to articulate what is dangerous, what is at risk for us and for our communities. And so I think when we can open up that dialogue, when churches can lead that dialogue and say, okay, we want to start to name this vice and virtue, these civic virtues that we can add to the community, that we can articulate, that we can bring to language and history and theology. It's not an accident that so many important political movements, be it suffrage with the Quakers or the civil rights movements with the Southern Baptist Church, was such a huge, huge component. They worked hand in hand to say, okay, we can put language to what we're striving for here. And then the politicians can pick up the baton and put processes both great and terrible behind what we're trying to pursue. And I think communities that already have trust, that can lead the way on those conversations, are going to be invaluable over the next 250 years, so that America is hopefully going to be celebrating.
Well, and the trouble is we're going to need all 250 of them because it's a very slow process. We were having a chat with your pastor before we came out about the word justice and how we used to have a shared definition of justice. But now you can say a word like justice in church and people get either very uncomfortable or they have a very narrow understanding of what justice means to them. And so because of people like us who fill the internet with words, because of everybody watching TV on their phone all day from 1,000 different people instead of just, getting their news from Walter Cronkite, whatever, we have tremendous challenge in a shared language. People ask us all the time, what do I do? How do I talk to people who are getting a totally different version of the news than I am? And that used to feel like the first question to me, but now the first question to me is, what do we do when we're using words and meaning totally different things with those words? Church is a great place to start unpacking that. We don't have to be afraid of that. Church is a great place. Church is one of the few places, one of the last places that says, hey, what if you came in here and slowed down for a second? What if you came in here and we had a moment when you weren't overstimulated? And we really
Some churches are still overstimulated.
I wasn't gonna talk about my feelings about that.
I'm just gonna say that right now.
I like a nice, quiet church service myself. But again, pluralism is all good. But church is a place where we can ask each other to slow down and we can say, hey, I would just love to know when you say justice what you mean. We're doing that at my church right now. Our theme for Lent is justice. And we are cash-strapped right now as a church. I'm sure some of you have experienced that before. It's not an easy thing. So we don't have a youth and families minister, so yours truly is trying to fill that role in a couple of ways. And so I took the sermon series our pastor had planned for Lent, and I wrote children's curriculum around it. And we're just spending a bunch of time saying, is justice the same thing as fairness? Is it the same thing as dignity? What does dignity mean if you're 8? If you look at the world when you're 8 and you think that you see a lot of unfairness, what does that tell you about God? Does that tell you about your relationship with God? What do you want to ask of God about that? What does God want to ask of you if you're 8? And those are fantastic questions. The church is uniquely suited to do that. Uniquely suited to do. We just have to trust ourselves. The community trusts you. Can we trust ourselves to have that kind of dialogue within our walls?
And that's what I love about a liturgy. I love that the words go out. And I know that hundreds of thousands of people across the entire globe, can you hear me tearing up again? Are hearing those words and interpreting them in an entire galaxy of meaning through the lens of their own experiences. And still we're coming together and we're going to say, the creed, and we're going to agree on some foundation upon which we can stand while we ask all those questions. We have to hold the fact that somebody is going to interpret that different, but hopefully you can come together on some basics. The paradox of that existence, the tension that inevitably happens when you are in a church with a lot of people, is just a proving ground. You can articulate your values all you want, but you have to live virtues in lives with other people. Let me give you a snarky example, since Beth gave that really, truly lovely one about the shower ministry. One of the most beloved traditions at my church is Christmas. Does everybody know what a Christmas is? No? Okay. At Christmas, which is my favorite time of year, and I hold it very dear, and my expectations are very high. My church gives every child in the congregation a handmade beaded ornament. Every year has a different religious symbol with a story attached to it. I have a friend in the congregation who is 46, and he has 46 Christmas. He buys his now that he's an adult. Just want to say that clearly. But everybody gets a Christmas. It fills me with joy and a sense of devotion. I feel like it is, I have an entire tree in my house dedicated to these. I keep them in a fireproof safe. I really love these ornaments, okay? And the man who makes them is a total and complete pill. He just is. He is fussy. He is rude. He borderlines on creepy. He's just not great, okay? And I think, what a Sunday school lesson every day for me, that I have to hold both of those truths. That is pluralism, right? That is the exercise. I have to live that virtue when I accept the ornament from him, okay? 3 of them every year. So I think that to me is what you can do in a church. You can play out that tension. You can let it exist knowing that you don't have to fix it, that person is not your project, that living out your virtues means you don't get to decide how he should act. And you certainly can't make him behave any way at all. You have to accept the gift that he brings and let him exist as he is. And I think that, listen, it is very hard. But I work at it because I love those ornaments. And I love him too, deep, deep down, because Christ calls me to love him. But I think that there's just not a lot of places that we can exercise that sort of virtue, where we can live out that tension of what it really means to be in community with lots of different people who are trying. They showed up. They're trying. They're trying. Some of them harder than others, but they are trying. And I think that that's literally true for most of human life. I know it feels like some people aren't trying, but they are. Their trying is just sometimes dangerous.
My pastor calls folks like that God's sandpaper. We have a few of them in our congregation. And I try to remember that I am God's sandpaper to somebody too.
Never. That's not true.
It is true. I could name him for you, actually. I know who I'm God's sandpaper for. It's all right. I think that one of the ways that we practice that virtue, we make that faith really active, and this is political too, is that in a church we ask everybody to do something, right? No matter what you have to give, we do want you to give it at church. And I feel like that's something that I've had to learn a lot about. I've been on a lot of nonprofit boards. I got to my church and started to realize it's a different quality to do a ministry than just a nonprofit. Because in a ministry, we do say to people, okay, you received something here. How would you like to give? Mm-hmm. And so the people who come to take showers at our church also help set up tables sometimes. And they also help pass out food during food distribution days. And so there is this sense of dignity in saying we're a pluralist place. Everybody can be different. Everybody belongs. But also everybody has something to contribute. And this only works if they do. And that is also, I think, incredibly political, because a lot of our politics has become so cynical because we've decided everybody's just a customer. Everybody's just a voter. I bet y'all are sick of political ads here right now, right? You've got some races that a lot of money is pouring into your state. And that's very demoralizing when you're just watching a commercial and being asked to do a thing, but your thing is just choose, right? That doesn't feel like you're involved in something. Church is a place where you can come in and we're not just giving you a commercial. I know some people think church is just like come and give to the offering plate, but like, a church that is built on trust says you have something really important that people need here. Maybe it's making the ornaments. We have a lady in our church who sends cards to everybody for everything. And she talks about, this is my ministry, I do cards. And it's beautiful. And she feels an enormous amount of dignity in herself because we value those cards that she makes. And I think the more we can think about everything that way, in every space I go into, everybody here has something to give, and I should ask it of them. It's rude of me not to. That's really transformative.
That's a lot of growth from an Enneagram too. I just want to say that.
Thank you so much. I have done a lot of therapy as well as a lot of worship services. But.
So we still want to hear from y'all. No one's raised their hand and interrupted us, but we are getting to the official, if you're just good line, rule following people who really want someone to announce it's Q&A time. It's Q&A time.
We are really excited to see people today.
Yeah.
Sorry, my hair doesn't look.
So we want to hear from you guys. Does anybody have any questions?
My question is, do you want this handheld?
No.
Okay. Perfect.
Oh, do you?
No, I'll get it.
Okay.
My hair's like a cat.
It's great.
It doesn't really care what I need, it's just gonna do its thing, but we'll figure it out here.
I do have a question. You all said this week on the podcast something about we have to allow people an opportunity to stay neutral. And I think one of the pressures that pastors feel these days is the pressure to always be making a statement. Something happens in the news. What are you going to say about it on a Sunday morning?
Yeah.
You open the headlines on Saturday. Iran has been bombed. Why does it have to happen on a Saturday when there's Sunday coming, right? So
Yeah.
how do you think about when you expect to hear from your pastor something from the pulpit about what's happening? And I guess where's that red line?
I understand and sympathize with the idea of, oh my gosh, this happened and now I have to talk about it. That's the first thing. I see you. I feel that pain. Because sometimes, we struggle. Here's the first thing I would say before what you expect of your pastor. Can you empathize? Do you know how hard it is to say something new or caring or even like illuminative about another natural disaster or another school shooting or another politician behaving in a way that some people, maybe not all people, find abhorrent? It's exhausting. So I think that's the first thing. I think, this relationship we're in with our pastors is also like, we don't want to become consumers where we expect that they check this box and meet this level for us. That's the first thing I think is really important. And, I think the liturgy does a lot of work here if you look for it. My minister has a lot of gifts. Sermons are not one of them. I'm just being honest. But he writes really beautiful prayers. And the prayers of the people always include the suffering around the world. And I look to that. I depend on that. Because I think sometimes all you can do is pray for people instead of expecting the pastor to come and put a bow on it for everyone. So I guess my answer is everybody lower their expectations for humans in general.
I think one of the unhealthiest dynamics that has come from social media is this feeling that we all have to be a press secretary about everything and we have to make a statement. As though the only way that we say something is by typing words out. Mm-hmm. The only way a pastor can say something is by directly addressing this headline from the pulpit.
And the absence is a statement too.
Right.
You can't even just not say anything because that's a statement.
So, we talked about listening at the beginning in the introduction, and I think we've got to get better at listening for more than just people's words. We're worded. And again, I recognize the irony of saying this, but we just got too many words going right now. The pastor says something by showing up again on Sunday.
Word.
We say something as people of faith by coming to the church again after something horrible has happened, right? There is an act of courage and faith and resilience every time you walk through the doors of a church. There are a lot more reasons to not come than to come. You know, it's so easy to talk yourself out of coming to church, especially when terrible things are happening in the world. So we say something just by being here and by saying we want to be together after this thing that has happened. And if that's all a pastor said, I'd feel quite comforted by that, you know? I think there are a lot of ways to say something in our context that don't require a political speech. I also, and we're going to spend all day tomorrow with pastors, and I also never mind and feel tremendously comforted by a pastor who says, I don't know what to say about this, but here we are together, we are loved, and we will get through it together. That's plenty for me. That's where trust is born, right, of that vulnerability. I feel sick about this. I'm so sad too. I have a sermon ready. I don't know if it's the right sermon to give today, but I'm going to try anyway. That's beautiful. That's like, I think just being together through it all is what church has as its superpower. And I wish that we would make a little bit more room for that and demand a little bit less of the press secretary on Sunday morning.
And also, I don't mind the pastors who are all the way on the other lines and like the front lines of Minneapolis. Like, I don't mind that either. There's room for everybody. Mm-hmm. And every congregation's different. And every pastor is a human being who brings his or her entire galaxy of existence there. The most powerful thing I've learned from being an Episcopal, I grew up Southern Baptist and now I'm an Episcopal. And, you know, I kind of used to get upset about sermons that I didn't agree with or I didn't think were good enough. And my husband was like, hey, we don't do that here. We don't do that. This is not about the personality. You want that, go watch Righteous Gemstones. Like, this is not what we do here. And it was really powerful and helpful to hear that, because I do think it became, and you know, when I was growing up, like, it was less about ministry and it was more about performance. And I think pastors who can show that this is about ministry and this is about loving people, and maybe that means for them that they do something expressly political, and maybe it means that they just show up and say, we're just here and I'm trying the best I can. I think all of that belongs, for sure.
I see a hand over here. Hi, thank you.
Hello, thank you. Before I ask my question, I want to introduce you to my friend Lori right here.
Oh, my God. Hi, Lori.
She is your biggest fan.
Hi, Lori.
And if we could get a picture at the end, I think that would make her year. Okay? No. For like listening to y'all for like 10 years. I don't even know, but she's Lori. All right. Okay, but I do have a real question. So I'm going to take it a little more granular and take it to family. So everything you said has been resonating with me, but I wonder what your thoughts are when you have people that you love with all your heart that maybe have wildly different views than you do about politics or, say, the world or our political leaders. Do you stay neutral? Do you approach them with love? Do you just not talk about it ever? What do you do? You know, like, what would you say in that space?
So we wrote a book called Now What that I'm really proud of. It's our second book. It's not as popular as the first, but I think it's really valuable because we break down the levels of relationship and we talk about, okay, because we get in this space where we're like, we're divided, what do we do? And we talk in broad strokes as if we're talking about, like, are you fighting with your husband's fifth grade teacher on Facebook, or is this your dad? Or is it like, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of matters. Who are we talking about here? So my dad is on the opposite end of the political spectrum than I am. We disagree vehemently about the current administration. And we've gone through phases. He definitely tried to unfriend me on Facebook once, and I said, that's not going to work. You can't do that. And sometimes, I think when the tenor in the outside world gets really loud, I find myself arguing with him in my head, and then I make the truly terrible choice to argue with him in real life. It's not always terrible. I mean, I think sometimes we get through to each other, and there was a moment in, I think it was 2021, it was like peak sort of woke, for use of a better shorthand word. And he was like, he looked at me and he said, you know I'm just an old white guy, but I still have worth too. And I was like the Grinch. I felt my heart grow 3 sizes. I was like, oh my God, this is what he was feeling the whole time, and I did not know. I did not know. I was not listening to my own father. And I'd already written the first book at that point. So it was a real indictment. Because our first book is called I Think You're Wrong, But I'm Listening. But I was not listening. Because it's hard. You think you know what a person's values are. And you probably do. But how someone lives out their values is exquisitely individualistic and totally outside of your control. And so, I play the long game. I like to wait till the tenor's real low and then send him some long reads. Do I think he reads them? Probably not. We had a great conversation about Bad Bunny. I'm going to take that as a win. I do like to keep it around low stakes controversies. I let my kids work on them. So, I don't have an easy rule for what that looks like. I think about it as an account. I take withdrawals, but I have to make deposits too. But I love my dad. And ultimately, that's really all that matters.
I heard from your dad this week too.
My dad likes to argue with Beth. I don't think it goes both ways.
He does. I love it when I hear from him. Look, I have 2.
Did he send you the AI created image of Hillary Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein?
That's what he sent me. Yeah.
How'd I know?
He did. It's fine.
He did admit it was AI created.
Good.
Yeah. So we got, success, victory.
Beyond Sarah's dad, who I also love, there are 2 people in my life that I feel this in a really acute way right now with. And while we have said for years that we don't have a math problem about this, I have kind of created a math problem for myself, which is to say, whenever I'm feeling like really worked up about it, I think, what percentage of my relationship with this person should be about politics? And I realize that it's very low, because we aren't deciding when to go to war together. And we aren't voting together on Medicare or Medicaid, We don't have to endorse the same candidate. So the percentage of our relationship that can be about politics is very low. That's not going to be true in every family. There are situations where you get to matters of identity.
Yeah.
Who do we treat with love and respect? I have quite a few, I call them my internet nephews, quite a few young men who've listened to our show over the years and reached out to me, and we text about how they are not accepted in their families because of who they love. That's a different percentage. It's just different situations change that percentage. It helps me to think about that percentage, and that informs, it's not really to me, do we or don't we? It's when do we, in what context, and what are we trying to do when we have those conversations? That's what I think about at church, too. I'm not trying to leave church with a policy proposal. I'm trying to leave church with a better understanding of what justice means to me as a person of faith. Right? So when I have this conversation with someone I know really disagrees with me, what's the point of it? That's why I like talking to Sarah. You can probably sense that we are quite different in our temperaments, But I always, no matter what we're talking about, I always come away understanding her a little better, understanding myself a little better, having some new questions, just having a new depth in how I'm thinking about something, not an answer. There aren't any. Like I said, we're going to need 250 more years to get anywhere. That's okay. But with those family members, if I can say, okay, I learned a new story about my mother-in-law through this conversation. I still think she's wrong, but I know something about how she got here, and that's valuable to me. That builds our relationship. She'll be willing to have this conversation again because I was interested in that story. That's what I'm looking for.
I think the reason this has gotten so sticky, which is something we haven't named yet tonight, is that politics has become one of the only places people can exercise their values, right? A lot of people don't go to church. A lot of people just think their political statements on social media is the best way to live out their values. I disagree. But I think churches and community organizations and places that are pluralistic, where people have to live together, suffer from that burden, suffer from that just lack of creativity, where it's just become this one way you can show whether you're a good person or not. Politics is politics. It is a dog-eat-dog, pragmatic compromise of how we're going to keep the roads clear and crime down and the border secure. It's not a place to prove whether you're a good person or not. And I think that, it has become that. It has become this sort of, it's a performance in a lot of ways. There's like political performance that everyone is expected to engage in. And that's what leads to that sort of, partisanship. I'm not saying like it was better or worse. That used to, that when you asked Americans, who can you not imagine your child marrying, was a member of a different religious faith or a different race. That doesn't faze anybody anymore. But ask if you want your child to marry somebody of a different political persuasion, and people lose it. What does that say? That says that's where we're placing all our identity in what we identify as in and out, good and bad, with me or against me. Oh, we got so many hands now.
Can I just say one quick thing while we're handing the mic? People in different parties will use different words to tell us why we're wrong about this, and this is very naive. And because what they feel is that the stakes are too high to do what we're talking about doing. But actually, if you read any history, the people who have faced extremely high stakes will tell you get through it through relationships. Nobody has ever gotten through something truly existential by saying, well, everybody who disagrees with me can go over there. That's not how you make your way through it. So I understand the temptation to say in normal times that would be fine advice, but these times aren't normal. But actually it's the most abnormal times where connecting to each other matters the most. Thank you. Sorry.
I'm here because I saw politics in the email, so that's why.
Thank you so much. Love it. Know thyself, you know what I'm saying?
At a time when in church, when people are feeling so much pain, it just seems like partisanship doesn't even matter. It's like they want the pain to go away. So I try to use God as a way of showing that your faith matters. God still loves you, as you mentioned before. Do you think that when there is pain, like you mentioned the civil rights, and we're just coming off of Black History Month, that whether it's partisanship or not, it's good to relieve the pain?
Well, I think there's a whole sermon in people just want the pain to go away. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the promise of church can be around relieving the pain, but I believe that church can promise to witness it and not diminish it, and to ask what part of alleviating the pain can we be for you. And, I have this mantra from a poem that I love this year. I'm trying to be with pain, mine or someone else's, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. Because I have learned, I would like to fix it. And I've learned that I can't always, and that sometimes my quest to fix is actually diminishing, flattening out someone's problem to a size that I can manage for them, and that's not respectful. So I guess my feeling is that church exists to say to people, if you are in pain, this place is safe for you, and you will be loved here, and we will hear it, and we will hold your hand through it in every way that you allow us to. And we will constantly tell you that you are loved no matter what else is happening.
I think there's a real space. I'm going to shift words ever so slightly and talk about suffering. because, Richard Rohr fans in the house? I'm working through his Universal Christ, Lenten study right now. And he just talked about how faith is like a water wheel. You're filled up with God's love, and life happens, and suffering happens, and you're emptied out, and then you're filled up again, and you're emptied out. And I think, when I was growing up in the Southern Baptist Church, there was not an articulation of the ever-present suffering in life. It was more like, yeah, but God loves us the most, and we'll probably avoid it. And so I think, I have learned this from my best friend who is Catholic, to articulate the role of suffering in life, because there are so many other places in our culture right now that will tell you can escape pain. You can go on social media, you can buy the product, even politics. Even politics is an empty message of we'll fix it. We'll fix it for you. And so I think to be in a place where suffering is accepted as an essential part of the human existence is really, really powerful. There's a hole in the market, as they say. Nobody talks about that. And I think and even in some faith communities, both of us grew up in faith communities where we experienced horrible trauma in high school, and the church didn't really have what Beth articulated, a vision to just be present with the pain instead of trying to fix it or diminish it. So I definitely think that not just presence when someone's in pain, but articulating that if suffering comes, and it will come, you did not do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong.
And it gets really challenging. Where's the line between your individual suffering and systems, And where does justice come into the room in those conversations? And to me, that's where we slow way down. And we try to move as one body of Christ as we ask those questions. Instead of rushing to have something that maybe temporarily makes us feel like we did something great. And being really present in our community and getting hyper-local about that question, so that we are not just trying to pronounce something on the national scene that also kind of reduces the problem to something that we can make a statement about and feel like we did it, and now we can get back to whatever our regularly scheduled programming.
This is why we wanted to start a Q&A early, because our answers are really long.
We don't do well in a lightning round format.
I hate lightning rounds. Even when they're my ideas, I still can't do it.
Hi.
Hi, Peter Wells. I'm a white man.
And full of worth, might I add.
Hi, Peter.
Like any other child of God.
So when you have two people that disagree, I hear a lot of what y'all are discussing is, how do we understand and listen? But is there a place for compromise? You know what I mean? Like actually making a decision to, you know what I mean? Or have we now lost our way there and everybody's gonna disagree and we just have to learn how to get along? You know what I mean?
I hope not.
Peter, I just came off the church board. No, we have to keep doing things, right? We have to keep trying things. We've come up on a couple of different decisions in our church. One about the music on Sunday morning, the classic fight, what kind of music are we going to have? Where sometimes you make a decision and people leave. And it's the worst. It's not what you want. We've had people leave over much more substantive theological decisions than that too. And that's really hard. So I don't ever want people to hear what we're saying and think, well, I guess we just are paralyzed. My hope is that there is a sense of calling involved in a church that you don't get in a lot of spaces around that compromise, that helps guide where you're going, so that at least a critical mass of people have a sense that this is the thing that we have to try now. Now, I think if you are calling for compromise, you also have to call for people to know that we're not doing something forever. Let's try this, right? We've debated for a long time. Let's try this. Here's when we'll talk about how it's going. There will be an opportunity for that, right? We're not making forever decisions here. But yeah, it's really tough. I just saw a couple this weekend who left our church. And man, seeing somebody who you used to go to church with is a really weird dynamic, because you want to express like, I miss you, but also I respect your decision, but also I'd love for you to come back, but no pressure. It's very uncomfortable. But that is kind of what it is. I do respect their decision. I'm not selling a product where I can say, if I give you a 15% discount, will you come back to church? You know what I mean? Like, we have to just keep moving forward and knowing that not everybody will come along. So I love baseball. I just try to remember that batting 300 is exceptional. And that's what I try to remember about decision making. If you keep making decisions, if you bat 300, it's exceptional. You are crushing it if you bat 300. And be willing to tolerate that failure along the way too.
Yeah, I definitely don't want us to stop. I feel like Congress has been like, it's too hard, let's just stop. And I would like them to start making decisions and compromises for sure. Sometimes I've served on many church boards, including the vestry. And my best friend's superpower is going, okay, let's just put it to a vote. Enough debate. Let's just put it to a vote. I do another podcast where we slow read Stephen King's The Stand. If anybody's read The Stand, it's dark. It's post-apocalyptic. Everybody dies. Spoilers because it was written in the 70s and republished in the 90s. So tough if I'm ruining part of the book for you. But there's a moment in a part I just read where everybody died and they're grouped into like the good people and the bad people. That's Stephen King. What do you want? And the good people are trying to put together like a government, basically. They're trying to put together a little structure to run things. And they're debating this really, really difficult call. It's a hard call. And the men in the room are like, we got to do this. And the women are like, no, we definitely shouldn't do this. It's a terrible idea. And my co-host and I had a big debate because the women eventually go, okay, we see that you're struggling with this. We're going to join you. We want it to be a unanimous decision. And she's like, I can't believe they changed their vote. And I'm like, no, they needed to change their vote. They heard them out. And maybe they still disagree. But it's like that phrase, you can be right or you can be married. You can be right or you can be in any relationship or institution that involves other human beings. Choose one. At some point, I learned this phrase from Beth, you have to disagree and commit. I got outvoted. It didn't go my way. I still disagree. The world's not going to end. Conflict is not abuse. It's just conflict. And I think our threshold for conflict has gotten to a place where we think, like, we have to convince the other person. No, you don't. You just have to outvote them. Come on. That's just the reality sometimes. Doesn't mean you love them any less. Doesn't mean they're not welcome. Doesn't mean, but sometimes we just got to make a call.
And then integrity check. Do I let other people bat 300? Am I willing to be outvoted sometimes and still stay here? Because if I'm asking that of other people, I got to be willing to do it myself too.
Mm-hmm.
See someone here and here?
Oh, yeah.
I'm a public educator. I don't know
Bless
if
you.
anybody else in the room.
Thanks so much.
Okay. My husband and I also have 2 children, so I'm kind of wanting to shift the conversation to kids.
Okay.
What are your views or opinions about how we loop children and youth into building community and into our political just climate, and without it being so aggressive feeling, or like back when we were kids, it was like, we don't talk about politics. Like, how do we create a healthy dynamic there?
In church or just generally?
All the things.
All the places. Got it. Well, let me tell you a story. My oldest son has always been very political. He was on the internet too much. That was my bad. But it was a long time ago, and we didn't always know what was going on. I didn't even know what Discord was. Okay, I was trying my best. Anyway, he's fine. He's going to be fine. So when he was a freshman and he was on the internet too much, he would get real spicy. He was like on that like in-stage capitalism tip. You know what I mean? Nothing worse than a teenager who wants to preach to you about in-stage capitalism and all their bills are paid for them. And I was like, I can't do this. And then we would just get into it. I just talked to a friend and she was setting up like a female investors club and he like scoffed and I was like, oh, hell no. I am a women's studies minor. You are not going to scoff at my female investment club. And we just got into it, and I was like, you know what, enough. Like, I see that this is important to you, and you care about this. And so instead of just you watch YouTube and then we fight about it, let's find an application for this energy. And so since he was a freshman, he's now a junior. Every Tuesday he goes to our local food pantry and he volunteers. And I don't hear any more about end-stage capitalism. And it's great. Because he cared. And it's really hard with your kids to not, squelch the caring in a way that teaches them to be nihilistic or keep it from you, but also in a way you don't want their hearts to get broken. It's hard. And so I think, in the debating always turns out way worse than if I just say, why don't we just try something with our hands and feet and see how that goes. My second one wants to never talk about politics ever again as long as he lives. We fight in the car about politics, and I fear he will open the door and duck and roll. He hates it so much. He can't stand it. My little one just likes a fight, so he's like in it anytime we talk about it. But it is hard, and I think because of the way kids consume media now, like if my kid turns on our television to watch Bluey, they don't watch Bluey. Who am I? I wish they watched Bluey. But let's say to watch Blackish, which he does love. It's his favorite television show. Just like a run-of-the-mill sitcom. No, nothing major. But the screen, when you turn your TV on, is like, Diddy documentary, the Epstein files. Like you can't keep them from it. And so there's always questions, and there's always arguments, and there's always like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, yeah, no. Like in the sense that like you have to say it's not always fair. And it doesn't work out the way we hoped. That's really, really, really hard. But can I tell you a funny story about it? It's kind of funny. It's not even my story, but I think it's the best. I had a friend who at the end of the 2024 election, I think it really gets to the heartbreak of dealing with this as your kids, so I want to tell it to you. And their child was just really invested in Kamala, really wanted Kamala to win, just loved Kamala, was so into Kamala. And they're like, oh my God, he was like 4 or 5, really little. How are we going to tell this child the results of the election? Oh my God, what are we going to do? They're in the car, they're telling them, they're like, oh, we have to tell you, buddy, Kamala didn't win. 10 seconds pass, 20 seconds pass, 15 seconds, 25 seconds, I can't count. And he goes, there's no Santa Claus, is there? That's it, man. You never know where the conversation's going when you start talking about one thing with your kids. Always, but particularly when it comes to politics.
I don't really know how to follow that.
Well, there's another hand up.
Well, I will say, I work with kids in a bunch of different contexts. I have 2 daughters. They're 10 and 15. If you want to be humbled, have a 15-year-old girl who lives with you, So I'm not saying that I know anything, because she assures me that I do not. But, I work with kids at church. I work with kids at school. I coach a process called future problem solving for 4th and 5th graders and 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And we've been doing that for 10 years now. So I've seen a lot of different kids. And what I think Sarah hits on that is true to my experience too, is that you just can't do artificial things with kids. It has to be real. It's sort of what we said about the church. You have to trust the church to be able to handle things and handle things that are wrong and that go sideways. You have to trust kids to handle things that are hard and that go sideways, that take you down paths you didn't expect to go down. Kids can smell a phony.
Or they can.
Kids know when you are sanding all the edges off for them and they don't appreciate that. And I think it's kind of like what we said with pastors too. I don't need my kids, I don't need to do politics with my kids in a way where every time something breaks in the news, we sit down and have a big family meeting about it. I need them to know that I care about that stuff. I need them to know that we give to our community. I do take them to vote with me every single time, and we talk about what's on the ballot and how I'm voting and why, and then I'll say, what would you do if you were me? I'm not going to change my mind, but I'm interested. And with my academic teen kids and my future problem-solving kids, I trust them with really hard topics to think deeply about the world. Now, my interactions with them are not heavily regulated. And I appreciate that yours are, and that there are a lot of people in contexts where they have a lot less room to trust kids than I have. And I can trust myself a lot more than in those heavily regulated contexts. But, we're talking about surveillance right now. That's our next topic for my middle school team. And we're having some tough, interesting, big picture conversations, and we have them without mentioning the name of any candidate. We don't need to, because one, it's called future problem solving. We're trying to think out into the future. But two, a lot of times when you're talking about the salient political issues of the day, where things are going, you're talking about private companies as much as you're talking about parties and politicians. Who's relevant right now? It's Anthropic and OpenAI and Facebook, Meta. So I just think trusting yourself, trusting the kids, being willing to get it wrong, being willing to tell them I don't know, showing them when I don't know what I do with that, honestly just teaching them what's a credible source, how do I look up the answer to something, that is equipping them. And I believe, working with these kids, that they have not been able to avoid it, and so they are equipped far beyond where I was at their age too. So I feel a lot of hope and optimism about them.
Oh, I hope this comes out right.
Always a great idea.
It's been burning on me today. I really appreciate the way you realize it's going to take time to change the way things are going and how partisan we are, and that you're very courageous in wanting to have these difficult conversations. I think that is part of what would you say when I bring up Jesus had told us, blessed are the peacemakers. I think eventually we have to get through this before we can have more peace. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I love history. I think history can give you a great deal of comfort if you look to it. In accepting that there are just waves of peacemakers and chaos agents. And even in times of great chaos, there are peacemakers even if they are not in charge, even if they are quiet, even if they are small. They are always there. And so I try to remind myself of that. I was just reading about, and I think that's true of the past, I think that's true of the future. I was just reading this list of logical fallacies we fall into, and one is called the sleepwalker bias. And we just assume that those in the future will sleepwalk into disaster, right? But they won't either. There will be peacemakers that come that we can't anticipate, that we have no idea what it will be like. I think that just remembering the smallness, which I think is always what Jesus is advising us to do, to remember that you are a small piece of the whole. And social media that gives you such main character energy can really, be a negative factor in trying to remember that. But that's what I really try to keep ever present.
When I am most confused, upset, despairing, when I just don't know, I go to the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. And having done that so many times now, I've kind of focused in on, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. I think I've prayed that prayer a lot, thinking, Lord, make them an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let them sow love. I'm doing it. Let them sow, you know what I mean? But the more I pray that prayer, I do realize, look, my calling is not to fix all of this. My calling is to continue to cultivate peace inside me and trust, again, that that's enough and that matters, that has impact. And if I do a candid assessment of my life, it does. It does. When I cultivate peace in myself, it does have impact. Some that I can see and a lot that I cannot. And so I think that is the right question for the moment, and I think it doesn't have a very satisfying answer outside of just what does that mean in my life right now. Hi, right here? Oh, over here, sorry.
Go ahead.
For me personally, it's such a hard journey because I have deep friendships that we have shared many years on this same faith journey, and we've seen life through the same spiritual lens. And now in recent years, that isn't at all. Our paths have diverged, and we don't talk about it. We don't acknowledge it. That tension is there, but the silence is equally as eroding, and it's just hard to know where to go with that. We pray for each other. I'm certain of that. We pray that the other will change their mind. Our prayers have not been answered. But it is a real challenge because, we've been through highs and lows of life. And it's through our faith that we've done that, and we've shared it, and we've worked in mission together, and we've just been incredibly close. So it's very wounding, and it makes me angry that our world has sort of drawn us into this situation, and that we seem to be at this place where none of us can back away from it, even within the church. And even in the church, there aren't kind of safe places sometimes to begin those conversations. So what do you think of all that?
I'm going to hold this microphone like a TikToker now, and I hope that it works. If it doesn't, in the back, just give me a sign. I'll figure it out. I wonder if you have any desire to say we pray for each other to change our minds with your friends. You don't. I hear you. I play mahjong with a couple of women in my church who are both in their 80s, and then my best friend who's more my contemporary. And something that they have taught me that I love is that when we're talking about something hard, we hold hands. And there's someone who recommends that. Like, there's a marriage counselor or someone who's written about, like, if you're going to say something radically honest with someone else that's going to hurt, you have to hold hands to do it. And I just wonder what it would be like sometime, maybe not immediately, but sometime to just say, hey, there's this elephant in the room that is painful. And clearly we all love each other enough to tiptoe around the elephant. But I wonder if we could just hold hands for a second and say a prayer about the elephant and just say, like, there is hurt here because of things outside of us and the way we see them. And we want to bless each other through that as we're all, because it is an act of love to still get together and to still care about each other even with that hurt circling us. I don't think there's a fix. I'm really sorry that you're going through that. That's painful.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly what I was going to say. Right. This is where history is a friend. I mean, even the new Ken Burns documentary, I don't know if you've watched it, the America 250 or American Revolution documentary. He does a really interesting thing where he argues basically it was a civil war. There were families who were loyalists that contained loyalists and patriots. They were not nice to each other. They weren't praying for each other. They were shooting at each other. Same for the Civil War. Same for so many moments. We don't want to think of ourselves as buffeted by the winds of history, but we are, and we are not the first. It's inevitable that history will act within our families and within our relationships on each other in very different ways. It's what happens. It's happening all over the world right now with some of the deepest, hardest conflicts around the globe that are playing out in families, not just friendships. And so, it's really hard, and also it could be so much worse. You know what I mean? Your sons could be fighting each other. That happened not that long ago to Americans. That's what I try to remember. Like, when I get down on myself, I'm like, oh my God, motherhood is so hard. I have to deal with TikTok and YouTube and Discord. And I told you I didn't even know what Discord was. But you know what else? My great-great-grandmother buried 10 of her 11 children. So, like, maybe I should, keep that in mind. Because I think it's like hard and comforting to me. It's hard to acknowledge, like, I'm just a person. And there are some just persons who can exert massive change over all of human history. I am not one of them. I told my kids when my 16-year-old is like, this is awful. I'm like, yeah, it sucks to be a plebe, man. Like, sometimes you're just but it would have sucked so much worse 200 years ago. So, celebrate your victories. And I think that's what history does for me. It helps me keep it all in perspective. And there's plenty of that within the Bible. Plenty of that. I was reading Aaron Hicks Moon, a Texan's book, I've Got Questions. And I grew up studying the Bible. I've read the entire thing. But there's at a point where she says, the Bible is not filled with people of strong faith. It's people that are challenged and questioning their faith all the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. How have I never realized that? Like, I think you feel like the Bible is full of everyone like Jesus. But even Jesus went out to the desert and struggled. Like, you know, everybody has these moments. Everybody feels like they're not enough, and their relationships are hard, and they're doing it wrong, and they're struggling. And those figures are in the Bible, and they're in our own history, they're in our own families. And it makes me feel good to know I'm just a link in that chain. It's deeply comforting.
I wind us back to the Chrismons for just a second. Okay. All the way back. So I wonder, in communities that are pluralist and that are trying to cultivate trust, when there's someone who is maybe a pill, or maybe their behavior is disruptive.
I'm just saying.
Okay, but bad behavior, where is the place for accountability in the midst of our communities?
I don't think we have a common definition of accountability, and that's a place to start. And sometimes I think when we use the word accountability, we are saddling a situation with a lot more than it's carrying. And so the first thing I try to check in with myself on is like, what is, again, kind of proportionally what's going on here? What am I bringing to this that is not what is in this? What assumptions am I making? What do I think this person knows about their behavior? My training is as a lawyer, so sometimes it helps me to think about how crimes have an element of intent, and there are different kinds of intent and different levels. When we impose accountability on people, we say, what did you know? So I try to hold myself accountable at church, especially when I am dealing with, God's sandpaper, to say, have I given this person any information about how they are affecting other people before I go to accountability? Have I just said, hey, thank you so much for making communion every week. When you taught so-and-so to do this with you, you did scare them. And they don't want to do it anymore. And I don't think that was your goal, because you surely do want other people to be able to do that. Or am I wrong?
Yeah.
Do you want us to stop recruiting people to do this?
Do you
and
want
just
this to be your
yours?
dominion? Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that is not a hypothetical example. So I think church is especially a place where when we're talking about accountability, it is very mutual. What am I accountable to in helping this person see themselves as part of the larger context? And am I seeing myself as having responsibility for helping them see themselves as part of a larger context? Of course, there are situations where taking a slow and generous approach has led to terrible abuses. And I think that's where you have to really trust your structures in a church and be willing to be a person who says hard things in the appropriate structures. We have a really good board creed that says, as a board member, I am responsible to tell the truth in this meeting. And I am responsible to leave this meeting being kind about everyone who was in it with me, keeping what was supposed to be confidential, and we hold each other to account through that covenant, And I just try to think about how does that covenant keep scaling up depending on the severity of the situation, but making sure that it does remain mutual. I hope that's responsive to your question.
I also think we define accountability different across generations. But I think the reason church is a valuable space is because it's one of the few cross-generational spaces I can put my children in, which I find enormously valuable. I don't mind if people scare my kids every once in a while. I think it's good for them. We used to have a swim teacher in my neighborhood they called the swim Nazi, and she threatened to break the heads off their trophy if they didn't jump off the diving board. I'm not saying you should parent like that, but I think she was a valuable addition to their lives. They learned to swim. So I just think there's like a room for a lot of different, everybody's different. I mean, what I always tell people, because I think this gets really, really sensitive with kids because of past abuses, and obviously I think all the processes we put in place to have transparency and accountability are invaluable and an incredible improvement for all of the human race. But I think that, I have a higher tolerance for conflict than most. That is the work of my life. I am very many people's sandpaper. But my kids have kind of learned that. Like we say it takes a village, but it doesn't take a village. It's not pluribus. Everybody's not the same. If y'all don't watch that show, I don't either. I just know everybody's the same in the show. They've like been taken over by an alien or something. It doesn't take a village of the same people. I think we say like it takes a village, but we want the village to all look like us. It takes a village that is going to, treat things differently and prioritize things differently. And that's not true. That doesn't just meet children's needs. It meets humans' needs. Because everybody's not going to react the same way you do. And so they're going to need each other, and I think that there is its own sort of energetic accountability that I think you think has to be made express every time. I'm not sure it does. But I do think that, checking in with ourselves when we do hold that accountability is really, really important.
I do think that accountability and drama cannot exist alongside one another. We talk about this quite a bit at my church. Like, drama is talking about a problem with someone who has no capacity to solve it. And so if you are in a situation where accountability is really called for, then I think a paramount responsibility of everyone involved is to agree we are not going to do drama around this, because we can't love each other well and do drama.
Hi. I am also an educator. I'm an elementary librarian, so in Texas.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Godspeed.
Yes. So y'all have been in my ears for over 10 years now and came in right at the right time. I'm an Enneagram 9, married to an Enneagram 1.
Oh, that's fun.
It's a journey.
I'm an Enneagram 1, y'all.
Yes.
We're awesome and right. Go ahead.
Correct. When I don't remember, this was like several questions ago, so I'm sorry, but somebody said something about peacemaking, and it made me think about y'all and doing Enneagram work and learning the difference as an Enneagram 9 between peacemaking and peacekeeping, and how peacekeeping is oftentimes actually what the work that people are asking us to do, which is to avoid conflict, which Enneagram 9s love to do. We are very conflict avoidant. And so I just wanted to say thank you for doing the work of peacemaking, which I think is stepping into these conversations and having hard conversations. I love when, Beth, you will follow up with like, I don't agree with that, or but it's not done in disrespect. It's just done in community. And I think so many times public school is a great place where you have a diverse community. And so many times we think of community as comfort, and community can be comforting, but there's also space, and there has to be space for discomfort there. So my question to you is, I guess with Enneagram work and things like that, how do you feel like we are called to be peacemakers instead of just peacekeepers in the current political landscape that we're in?
Well, I think the thing I always remind myself about the Enneagram is that everybody's all of them. Now, I just happen to be the least amount of a 6, which just so happens to be my husband's number. So I learned that lesson a lot. Like there is still even a little bit of me that's an Enneagram 6. If you don't know what the Enneagram is, it's a personality typing rubric, actually based around the 7 deadly sins with some extras thrown in for fun. But it's about what motivates people in times of stress, which is super hyper relevant right now. And so I think the Enneagram to me is just, especially in peacemaking, is such an important reminder of something we all know intellectually, but you can never sort of check in with enough, which is you think people are thinking about you, but they're thinking about themselves. You think they're motivated by you. They're just motivated by their own personality and how they move in times of stress. And so peacemaking, like when you know there's conflict coming, is like a reminder, like, well, they're going to act out of stress of that conflict, but it probably has nothing to do with me. And I think that discomfort, I actually think people are hungry for a little discomfort right now. Because I think there is an emptiness and a numbness to the constant pursuit of comfort. And the peacemaking, to me, is okay, let's just put it for a vote. Let's name what needs to be named. Let's call out the tension and see if the relationship stays afloat or doesn't. And if it doesn't, how much of that relationship do we care to save, if any? I just think that there does come a time for choosing in a church, in a relationship, in a school, in an institution, in a country. And, you know, I not only have a higher tolerance for conflict, I have a higher tolerance for change. Less, the more children I have. But I think just like owning that and owning like what makes you uncomfortable in times of stress and checking in with that as the peacemaking commences, because it can get real fast. That's what I think the Enneagram is really valuable for.
I don't think I can improve on that answer.
Thank you both so much. We've had a chance to ask you some questions, and while you won't hear all of our answers, I'm curious if there's a question you're holding that you want to have us ask ourselves as we go off to dinner and go places with the people we love or at least are tolerating this evening. I wonder, is there something you would have us talk about that might be good for us?
I love that question. We're thinking. I mean, I'm obsessed with this like vice virtue framework. I think there's something really valuable in looking for yourself in the vices. Not something we're trying to do. Instagram wants us to always think about how great we are. So does capitalism. But I think there's something really valuable in kind of going back to those old tools that use words like sloth and avarice and sin that can make us uncomfortable. I find it very valuable. So I don't know if that's like a question or a journaling prompt, but I'm actually reading a book right now called Ask of Old Paths, which is about the medieval approach to vices and virtues. My answer is always going to be a book recommendation. So a journal prompt and a book recommendation.
Can I talk about the pit again for a second?
Yes. It's a callback. It's a perfect wrap-up.
Something that I really enjoy about that show is how much it makes me think about training. You know, it's a teaching hospital if you don't watch the show. So there are student doctors, and they're working and learning in these very high stakes cases, but they have these attending physicians to come give them advice and teach them as they go along. And I think a lot about what am I trained to do when I watch that show? Where did I get training? And I was trained as a lawyer. And in the early 2000s in a large Midwestern law firm, that meant that I was trained to talk people out of absolutely everything because I can see all the problems. That's what I was trained to do, to spot problems. And so I've been thinking a lot lately in my faith life about the relationship between my training and my faith. When I talk about calling, what I've realized is that the things I feel called to are the things that I can absolutely talk myself out of, but I can't say no to for whatever reason. Like calling is the thing that my training cannot allow me to evade. And so I think it might be interesting, especially over dinner, to have a conversation about what you're trained to do and how that shows up, if at all, in your faith life.
I love it. Thank you both. So go from here and talk about all of the vices that you carry and all of the things that you could talk yourself out of but won't say no to. Friends, thank you for being here this evening. I'm really grateful for your willingness to come and be part of this conversation. Sarah and Beth, thank you for helping. For sharing your wisdom, your passion, your laughter. It's been a really great time. So friends, would you thank them again?
Thank you.